Hey there, I haven't looked at anything related to James Joyce's Finnegans Wake in a long time. It's time to remedy that with this book, which I recently finished. Took me, I read it really slowly, but I know I haven't done any Finnegans Wake videos in over a year, I think, so it's time. And this book is a collection of essays and short pieces, some poetry, some short fictions by Robert Anton Wilson. And it came out, when did it originally come out? I don't know, sometime maybe late 80s, I don't know. But the point is, it came out then, and then like around, I think 2017, a new edition came out with two big editions that I think may make it worth finding a copy of that one, because I mean the old one has all the essays and stuff, but the new one has an introduction by Alan Moore that I think is one of the best pieces of prose writing that Alan Moore's ever done. It's just absolutely incredible, and I think he realized that Wilson was such a big influence on him that he had to pull out all the stops and do a really great piece. So he did. And then in the back of that, though, there's an appendix with, I don't know how long in the printed edition, but I think they say it's like 80 pages more of an interview that Wilson did with this guy in 1983 when he was living in Ireland. So that was pretty interesting. I thought there was a lot of great nuggets in there that to be pulled out, and a lot of things I'd never heard him comment on before. For example, like how he first discovered Burroughs. He was saying like he was looking at some magazine or something that had a piece by Jack Kerouac, and I always thought it was weird that Wilson never commented on Kerouac. He would talk about Ginsberg and Burroughs, but he never mentioned Kerouac. So this is like the first time I think he's ever said anything that I've seen him say anything about Kerouac, and it was very dismissive. He said like, I thought Kerouac was out there, and then I read Burroughs or something like that. So, anyways, yeah, there's a long interview in the back of that where he talks about futurism and a lot of interesting things. Almost every futurist in the past seems to overestimate kind of at least four different areas: how fast AI will kind of come to, general AI or functional robots or talking, so on, or how fast that we're going to get into outer space and live in space, how quickly we'll be able to extend our lives indefinitely or so on. And there's one other thing that I think they all kind of misjudge. I don't remember. But it has a lot of interesting thoughts, though, about like cryptocurrencies. Well, I don't think he refers to it cryptocurrencies, but he talks about money and like decentralized money systems and creating your own money system. Kind of like how he talks about with religion. You can create your own religion, and everyone can be a pope, things like that. And so a lot of interesting stuff. Yeah, I enjoyed that interview. So if you can find the newer edition, you may be worth your time. But I'm just going to breeze through this edition, the older edition, which is all I have in a PDF form. And the reason I'm showing it visually is because usually I just talk about prose books, but with this one, there's a lot of visual stuff, because four of the essays in this are relating to Joyce, James Joyce, and especially Finnegans Wake. And if you read other Wilson books, he touches on Joyce almost all the time. He'll just like very lightly say, oh, Joyce is really great, or refer to the man in the Macintosh or some little detail, but he doesn't do like things really focused on Joyce. It's not like he does an entire book or essay. But if you want that, this is the book for that, because I don't know of any other book where he goes so deeply into James Joyce, especially Finnegans Wake. So I think that makes this worth reading. These are all the little visual symbols that Joyce includes in Finnegans Wake. I think there's another book called The Sigla of Finnegans Wake that I started. One of you guys recommended, and it was good, and I liked it, but I never went back to it and finished it, and I need to. So maybe I'll look at that next. Yeah, so there's all these symbols, and I don't claim to have mastered this by any means, understand the complete what they stand in for. Instead of characters, you have these kind of shells or shapes or general forms or archetypes of what characters can be or how the unconscious exists and so on. Very Kabbalistic ideas, I think. So I think you need these symbols in whatever edition you get, because otherwise you're not going to understand it. If for some reason you have a text that doesn't include the symbols, you're going to be lost. Okay, and then between the essays, the four essays of the book, there's other stuff, and I don't know. It's kind of disposable. I think a lot of it's like there's poetry, there's random essays that he did, there's like kind of fiction pieces and stuff that would kind of later be expanded. Like the book of the breast, he does like an earlier version of that here. But some of it's pretty interesting, and I'm glad I read it all. But there's no way I could have just read through this from front to back in like a few days. That would have been too much. I think the second essay he talks a little more about Joyce. I mean about Ulysses. This one's a little more Ulysses focused, but the other ones, but he does get, you can see the symbols pop up again, that he does kind of return back to Finnegans Wake. I mean, it's more articles, some kind of fictions. Sometimes the line between his fiction and his nonfiction really blurs. Alan Moore in the intro says that this is his favorite. I think he says favorite or the best Wilson book. I don't agree with that, but I agree that the essays on Joyce are very interesting. I think his nonfiction books, probably Prometheus Rising and Quantum Psychology, I prefer a little more. And for his fiction, I like all his fiction, but I think the Schrodinger's Cat trilogy is probably my favorite. So we get the third essay. He starts to, I think the first essay is the most general, and then he gets more and more into these kind of, I don't want to say they're crackpot theories, but they're very definitely out there. And he has like these charts in which he talks about the basic isomorphisms of these characters, symbols, and how they function. And sometimes, connecting them to the I Ching and passive yin, passive yang, and so on, I can kind of follow that. But then he starts connecting it to like the DNA helix and the, what are they called? The thymine and adenine. I don't see. I couldn't follow that reasoning quite well, but who knows? Maybe I'm just not a geneticist enough to handle that. There's an interview with this guy Sean McBride, who I didn't know who he was, but it was pretty interesting. It's very different too from the interview where the guy's interviewing Wilson. This is Wilson interviewing some other guy who probably has no idea who Wilson is. But I enjoyed it. It was interesting. I don't know a lot about modern Irish politics, so it's there's a lot to learn. All right, has this final cut up in the back that isn't quite as complete cut up as Burroughs, but it has more form given to it. He does sculpt it a little, but it is pretty abstract in points. It was interesting. And then finally we get the final Finnegans Wake essay, which has more diagrams. And I don't claim to understand this completely. Although some of it I did, and some of it I thought was pretty interesting. But there's always more to follow and learn in Finnegans Wake. Yeah, so that's Coincidance. Find the newer edition if you can. If not, the old edition is still pretty great. And I think after this, I always say this after every Finnegans Wake video. I'm going to do more soon, but it's been like a year and a half since the last one. So obviously that didn't happen. But I have not forgotten. I think I may go back to that book, The Sigla of Finnegans Wake, and maybe I'll look at that next. See you there. Bye.